They laughed when I walked in, still wearing my navy blue scrubs, my hair tied back, my sneakers damp from running through a parking lot in the rain, and my mother-in-law actually tilted her head and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Did you get lost on your way to a real job?" The room followed her lead, soft chuckles at first, then louder until even my husband's cousin leaned over and whispered, "Wow, she really came like that." I had just come off a 12-hour shift, my hands still smelling faintly of antiseptic, my body running on coffee and adrenaline, and somehow in that moment none of that mattered. What mattered to them was that I didn't look like I belonged, and the worst part was my husband didn't say a word. If this story speaks to your heart, take a second to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Only if this story truly resonates with you. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and this was the night my husband's family tried to humiliate me in front of everyone. Not knowing I had just saved one of their own. But to understand how I ended up standing there, being laughed at like I was nothing, you have to go back to where it all started. I married into the Carter family 2 years ago. They're the kind of family that takes photos before dinner. The kind that uses words like presentation and standards like their rules carved in stone. My husband, Daniel, grew up in a big white house just outside of Chicago. The kind with a circular driveway and perfectly trimmed hedges that never seemed to change no matter the season. His mother hosted events like they were productions, everything planned down to the napkin folds. And from the very beginning I never quite fit. I wasn't from money. I didn't grow up with country clubs or summer trips to Martha's Vineyard. I grew up in a small apartment over my dad's auto shop in Ohio. I worked my way through college. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I became a surgeon because I didn't have another option. I had a goal, and I chased it until it was mine. But to them that didn't translate. To them I was just different. At family dinners they'd ask me what I did, and when I told them I worked at the hospital there was always this pause, like they were trying to decide if it was impressive or inconvenient. My sister-in-law once said, "Oh, so you're like, always busy." And when I nodded she smiled and said, "That must be exhausting for Daniel." Not for me. For him. It was always like that. Small comments. Quiet judgments. Nothing big enough to call out. But enough to feel. Enough to know. And still I tried. I showed up to every event I could. Birthdays. Holidays. Anniversaries. Even when I had just gotten off a shift. Even when I was running on 3 hours of sleep. As I thought, eventually they'd see me. Eventually they'd understand. That night was their annual family reunion. Over 50 people. Extended relatives, friends, business connections. The kind of event where appearances mattered more than anything. I wasn't supposed to be late. I knew that. I had even planned my shift around it. But that afternoon everything changed. A patient came in just before my shift ended. Complicated case. High risk. There was no one else available. And I didn't hesitate. I stayed. Because that's what I do. That's who I am. Hours passed. Time blurred. And by the time we were done, by the time I stepped out of that operating room, my phone was full of missed calls. Messages from Daniel. From his mother. "Where are you? You're going to be late. This is important, Emily." I looked at the time. I was already over an hour behind. I didn't go home. I didn't change. I grabbed my bag, ran to my car, and drove straight there. 45 minutes. Traffic. Rain starting to fall. I kept thinking, just get there. Just show up. That's what matters. When I pulled into the venue, I could see the lights through the windows. People inside, dressed in suits and dresses, glasses in hand. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. Scrubs. Tired eyes. Hair pulled back. And for a second I hesitated. I almost turned the car around. But I didn't. I took a breath. Stepped out. And walked in. And the moment I crossed that threshold I felt it. The shift in the room. Conversations slowing. Eyes turning. That quiet ripple that spreads when something doesn't quite belong. I spotted Daniel near the center of the room. He saw me. His expression flickered, surprise, then something else. Not relief. Not pride. Something closer to discomfort. I started toward him, but I didn't make it far. His mother intercepted me. Smile tight. Eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Emily," she said, her voice sweet in that practiced way. "You made it." Then she leaned in just enough for others to hear. We were beginning to think you weren't coming. Or that you didn't have time for us. A few people nearby chuckled. I opened my mouth to explain, to say something about the hospital, about the patient, about why I was late. But she didn't give me the chance. And the outfit, she added, tilting her head. Is this your version of formal? More laughter. Softer this time. But sharper. And I just stood there. Because in that moment I realized something. It didn't matter what I had done that day. It didn't matter who I had helped. To them, I was still the outsider who showed up wrong. I glanced at Daniel. He was watching. Silent. And that silence said everything. I did not defend myself. I did not raise my voice. I just nodded once like I had heard it before, because I had. Someone behind her laughed again, and I caught a glimpse of Daniel's aunt whispering something into her husband's ear, both of them glancing at me like I was part of the entertainment. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder and said quietly, I came straight from work. My mother-in-law smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Yes, she said, drawing the word out slightly. We can tell. A few more people nearby turned their heads, now openly watching. It was not subtle anymore. I could feel the heat rise in my face, but I kept my expression steady. I had learned that a long time ago. When you grow up with nothing, you learn how to stand still while people decide what you are worth. Daniel finally stepped forward, but instead of standing beside me, he positioned himself just slightly ahead, like he was trying to smooth something over without actually choosing a side. Emily had a long day, he said, his tone light, almost rehearsed. She came as fast as she could. His mother gave a soft laugh. We all have long days, Daniel. But we still managed to present ourselves properly. There it was again. Presentation. Always presentation. I looked at him, waiting just for a second, to see if he would say anything else. He did not. He just gave me a quick glance, the kind that says, do not make this worse, and then looked back at his mother. And something inside me went quiet. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet. Like a door closing. I should say hello to everyone, I said, more to myself than to them, and stepped past her before she could respond. The room felt bigger than it had from outside. Round tables, white tablecloths, gold accents, soft music playing in the background. People were dressed like they had spent hours getting ready. Silk dresses. Tailored suits. Perfect hair. And then there was me, in scrubs that still carried the faint creases from a 14-hour day. Standing under bright lights that made every difference more obvious. I moved toward the edge of the room, hoping to disappear into the background, but that was not how this worked. This family did not ignore what did not fit. They highlighted it. Emily, someone called out, loud enough to cut through the room. I turned. It was Daniel's sister, Rebecca, already smiling before I even reached her. You made it, she said, looking me up and down in a way that felt almost practiced. We were just talking about you. I gave a small nod. I got held up at the hospital. Of course, she said quickly, like she had expected that answer. Always the hospital. She turned slightly, addressing the small group around her. Emily works there, you know. She is very dedicated. There was something in the way she said it. Not admiration. Something else. That must be hard. One of her friends added, tilting her head sympathetically. Being on call all the time. Missing things. I did not respond right away. I had heard this version before too. The one where dedication becomes inconvenience. Where commitment becomes absence. It is part of the job, I said simply. Rebecca smiled again, then glanced at her watch in an exaggerated way. Well, you almost missed the welcome speech. Mom was just about to start. Almost. Not quite. But close enough to be noticed. You should probably freshen up, she added, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel like advice. There is a restroom down the hall. I looked at her for a second. Then I said, I am fine. She held my gaze for a beat longer than necessary, then shrugged lightly like she had tried. Like she had been polite. And that was how it worked here. Everything wrapped in politeness. Everything delivered with a smile. I stepped away again, this time finding a spot near one of the tall cocktail tables at the back of the room. From there, I could see most of the space without being in the center of it. Conversations flowed around me, but none of them included me. People passed by, some nodding, some pretending not to notice. I picked up a glass of water from a nearby tray. More to have something in my hands than because I needed it. I had not eaten since early that morning. I had not even thought about it. My body was still running on routine, on focus, on the quiet aftermath of a long shift where every second mattered. And now, standing there, everything felt different. Slower. Sharper. I could hear fragments of conversations drifting toward me. That is her. She came like that? I thought she would at least change. Small sentences. Quiet enough to deny. Loud enough to feel. I did not turn. I did not react. I just stood there, letting it pass through me like background noise. Because reacting would only confirm what they already believed. That I did not belong. That I did not understand how things worked here. At the front of the room, Daniel's mother stepped up to a small podium, tapping the microphone lightly. The soft hum of conversation began to fade as people turned their attention toward her. "If everyone could gather for a moment," she said, her voice smooth, practiced, filling the room without effort. People moved closer, forming a loose crowd around the front. I stayed where I was at the edge, partially behind a column, close enough to hear, far enough to avoid being seen. Or so I thought. "Before we begin," she continued, her eyes scanning the room, "I just want to say how important it is that we all come together like this as a family." She paused, letting the word settle. Family. It is about showing up. Being present. Making the effort. Few people nodded. Someone murmured agreement. And then, almost casually, her gaze landed on me. Even when it is not convenient. There were a few soft laughs. Not loud. Not obvious. But enough. Enough to make it clear. I did not move. I did not look away. I just stood there holding my glass, feeling every eye that followed hers. And in that moment I understood something completely. This was not about tonight. It never had been. This was about reminding me in front of everyone exactly where I stood. And for the first time since I walked into that room, I stopped trying to prove anything at all. No one clapped after that line. Not really. There was a polite ripple of acknowledgement, a few scattered nods. But the energy in the room had shifted into something tighter, more focused, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. I could feel it, that subtle anticipation, like I had been placed at the center of something without agreeing to it. I set my glass down on the table beside me, my fingers steady even though my chest felt heavy in a way I could not quite explain. I told myself it did not matter. That this was just another moment. Another comment. Another reminder. I had handled worse. At the front, my mother-in-law continued speaking, her tone warm again, as if nothing had just happened. She thanked everyone for coming, mentioned family history, traditions, stories that had been told 100 times before. People relaxed. Some smiled. A few even laughed at her familiar jokes. And just like that, the spotlight moved away from me. Or at least it seemed like it did. I stayed where I was, near the back, letting the distance settle around me. I watched as servers moved between tables, refilling drinks, adjusting settings, making everything look effortless. I watched as Daniel rejoined a group near the front, his posture easy, his expression calm, like nothing had happened at all. He did not look back at me. Not once. That part stayed with me more than anything else. Not the laughter. Not the comments. Him. Because silence in moments like that is not neutral. Chooses a side. I folded my hands loosely in front of me and took a slow breath. I could leave. That thought came quietly, almost gently. Could walk out. Get back in my car, drive home, and pretend this night never happened. No one would stop me. They might talk about it later, maybe frame it as me being dramatic or sensitive, but they would move on. They always did. I shifted my weight slightly, glancing toward the exit. It was not far. Just a few steps past the hallway, through the glass doors, out into the cool air. Simple. Clean. Easy. But something held me there. Not pride. Not stubbornness. Something else. Something quieter. The kind of feeling that settles in when you realize you are at a turning point, even if nothing obvious has happened yet. At the front, the speech began to wrap up. And tonight, my mother-in-law said, her voice lifting slightly, is not just about family but about giving back. As many of you know, we have partnered with a local foundation this year. There were a few murmurs of approval. People straightened, paying attention again. This part mattered to them. Reputation. Contribution. Image. We are honored to have representatives here with us tonight, she continued, gesturing toward a small table near the stage. I followed her hand with my eyes and noticed a man I had not paid attention to before. He stood near the edge of the platform holding a folder, dressed in a simple dark suit. Not flashy. Not loud. Just present. They will be sharing a few words about the work they are doing, she added, stepping slightly to the side. The man nodded, waiting patiently, his expression calm. I felt something shift again. Not in the room. In me. A faint sense of recognition. Not of him specifically, but of the situation. Of the timing. It brushed past me like a memory I could not quite place. I looked away, dismissing it. It did not matter. None of this did. I reached for my bag again, adjusting it on my shoulder, this time more deliberately. I was going to leave. I had stayed long enough. I had shown up. That was more than enough. I took one step back, turning slightly toward the exit. And then I heard my name. Not loudly. Not yet. Just enough to make me pause. I froze for a second, thinking I had imagined it. But then it came again, clearer this time, carried through the microphone at the front of the room. Emily Carter. The sound of it cut through everything else. Conversations stopped. Glasses paused midair. Heads turned. Not toward the stage. Toward me. I did not move. I did not understand. For a moment my mind went completely blank, like it was trying to catch up to something that had already happened. At the front, the man with the folder stepped forward, adjusting the microphone slightly. I hope I have that right, he said, scanning the room. Emily Carter? There was a small pause. A beat of silence that stretched just long enough to feel heavy. And then I realized. He was looking for me. I felt every pair of eyes in the room settle into place. The same people who had been laughing minutes ago were now watching in a different way. Curious. Expectant. Uncertain. I slowly turned back toward the front, my body moving before my thoughts fully formed. I did not step forward. Not yet. I just stood there, caught between leaving and staying, between disappearing and being seen. And for the first time that night, the room was completely silent. No one laughed this time. No one whispered. The silence held, thick and unfamiliar, as if the entire room had shifted into a place it did not quite understand. I felt it pressing in from every side, all those eyes, all that attention, the same people who had just minutes ago decided exactly who I was. I did not step forward right away. I just stood there, my hand still resting on the strap of my bag. My body angled slightly toward the exit like I had not fully changed my mind. The man at the front adjusted his glasses, scanning the room again. Emily Carter, he repeated, a little more certain now, like he knew I was there. I took a breath. Slow. Controlled. The kind you take before walking into something you cannot step back from. Then I raised my hand slightly, not high, just enough to be seen. That is me, I said. My voice came out steady. Surprised me a little. The man's expression shifted. Recognition settling into place. There you are, he said, a small smile forming, not performative, not polite, but genuine. Would you mind coming up here for a moment? There was a pause, just a second, but it stretched. I could feel the weight of the room pressing forward, waiting for me to move, to confirm what this moment was becoming. I glanced once toward Daniel. He was looking at me now, really looking, his expression no longer neutral, no longer distant. Confused. That was the word. Confused, and something else just beginning to form underneath it. I did not wait for it to become anything more. I stepped forward. The sound of my shoes against the floor seemed louder than it should have been, each step carrying through the quiet space. I walked past the same people who had been watching me earlier, but now their expressions had changed. No one smiled. No one laughed. They just watched. Closely. Carefully. I reached the front, stopping just beside the small platform, not stepping onto it yet. The man turned slightly toward me, lowering his voice just enough so only I could hear. Dr. Carter, he said, his tone respectful, certain. Thank you for staying. The word doctor landed differently than anything else that had been said that night. Not louder. Not sharper. Just correct. I nodded once. Of course. He gestured gently toward the platform. Please. I stepped up. The lights felt brighter there, the room clearer, every face more visible. I could see my mother-in-law standing just off to the side, her posture still composed, but her expression no longer smooth. It had shifted just slightly, like something had moved underneath it that she could not quite control. The man stepped back to the microphone. "Thank you all for your patience," he said, addressing the room again. "I had not planned to do this quite like this, but sometimes timing works out in ways you do not expect." A few people shifted, leaning in slightly. He opened the folder in his hands, glancing down briefly, then back up. "Earlier today," he continued, "our foundation received an update from the hospital regarding a case we have been closely connected to." I felt it then. That recognition again, stronger this time, clearer. My hands remained still at my sides, but my focus sharpened. The room was completely silent. "A member of this extended community," he said carefully, "was admitted under urgent circumstances." There was a ripple of movement now, subtle but noticeable. People exchanging glances, trying to connect the dots. "The procedure was complex," he added, "and time was critical." He paused just long enough to let the weight of that settle. I kept my gaze forward. I did not look at anyone. I did not need to. "But thanks to the skill and dedication of one individual," he said, his voice steady, "the outcome was successful." Another pause. Longer this time. I could feel it building, that quiet tension that comes just before something shifts completely. "Dr. Emily Carter," he said, turning slightly toward me, "was the lead surgeon on that case." It did not happen all at once. The reaction came in layers. First confusion, then recognition, then something else entirely. I did not move. I did not speak. I just stood there, letting the words settle into the room, into the people who had heard them, the same people who had laughed, the same people who had looked at me and decided I did not belong. The man continued, his voice carrying clearly. "She has just come from a 12-hour shift," he said, "and still chose to be here tonight." There was no judgment in his tone, no emphasis, just fact. Simple, direct. I could feel the shift now, not just in the room but in the space between people. The way they looked at me, the way they held themselves, the quiet recalculation happening in real time. I glanced once briefly toward my mother-in-law. Her lips were pressed together, her expression no longer composed. Not shocked, not yet, but no longer certain. And Daniel, he was still staring, not confused anymore. Something else had taken its place. Something that looked a lot like realization. I turned my attention back forward, my posture steady, my hands still. I did not smile. I did not speak. I did not need to. Because for the first time that night, I was not the one being explained. They were. No one spoke for a few seconds after that. Not even a whisper. It was the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise, like the air itself had changed shape. I stood there under the lights, not moving, not filling the space, just letting the truth exist exactly as it was. The man beside me closed his folder slowly, then looked back out at the room. "We often talk about impact," he said, his voice calm, measured. "About generosity, about legacy, about what it means to truly make a difference." He let that settle before continuing. "Tonight I think we have already seen that." There was a soft shift in the crowd, people adjusting their posture, their expressions, their understanding. I could feel it without looking directly at them. The recalculation, the quiet rewriting of everything they had assumed just minutes ago. He turned slightly toward me again. "Dr. Carter did not just show up tonight," he added. "She showed up when it mattered most." He did not say more than that. He did not need to. The weight of it was enough. I gave a small nod, nothing dramatic, nothing that invited attention, just acknowledgement. Then I stepped back from the microphone. Not quickly, not slowly, just naturally. The lights felt less harsh as I moved away from the center. The room did not feel the same anymore. I could feel the difference in the way people looked at me now, but I did not meet their eyes. I did not need to see it to know it was there. As I stepped down from the platform, the first sound returned. Not laughter. Not whispers. Applause. It started small, a few people near the front, then spread outward, uneven at first, then stronger, more certain. I did not react to it. I did not turn back. I just walked. Past the same faces. past the same tables. But nothing about it felt the same. Someone said my name as I passed. Quiet. Careful. I did not stop. Another voice followed, softer, almost unsure. Emily. I kept moving, because I understood something now that I had not allowed myself to accept before. Respect that arrives after humiliation is not the same as respect freely given. It is not something you chase. It is something that reveals people for who they are. I reached the edge of the room again, near the same spot I had stood before, but it did not feel like a place to hide anymore. It felt like distance. And I was not standing in it the same way. Daniel found me there. Of course he did. He moved quickly, faster than I had ever seen him move at one of these events, weaving through people who now stepped aside for him without question. When he reached me, he stopped just a step too close, like he was not sure how to stand. Emily, he said, my name coming out differently than it had earlier. Not casual. Not dismissive. Careful. I looked at him. Really looked. His expression had changed completely. The ease was gone. The quiet confidence replaced with something unsettled. Why did you not tell me? He asked. It was the first thing he said. Not I am sorry. Not are you okay. Just that. I held his gaze for a moment before answering. I did, I said. My voice was calm. You just did not listen. He blinked like the words had not landed the way he expected. I mean about today, he added quickly. About the surgery. I shook my head slightly. It was just work, I said. It is always just work. That was the truth. For me, it had never been about recognition. It had never been about proving anything to anyone in that room. It was what I did. Who I was. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing briefly toward the front of the room where his mother still stood, speaking quietly to someone, her posture tight, controlled. They did not know, he said, almost to himself. I did not respond, because that was not the point. Not knowing does not excuse how you treat someone. It reveals it. He looked back at me, searching for something. You should have said something, he insisted, his voice lower now, like he was trying to fix something that had already broken. I let a small breath out, not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. When? I asked. When your mother was commenting on how I looked. Or when your sister was explaining my job to her friends. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. No answer. Of course there was no answer. Because there had been moments. Many of them. And he had chosen silence in all of them. I adjusted the strap of my bag again, the familiar motion grounding me. It is fine, I said, not because it was, but because I was done explaining it. Done asking for something that should not need to be asked for. Around us, the room was still shifting. People approaching, then hesitating. Watching, then looking away. The energy had changed, but it was not something I needed anymore. Emily, he said again, softer this time. I met his eyes one last time. I am tired, I said simply. I am going home. He did not try to stop me. Maybe he understood. Maybe he did not. But he stepped aside. And that was enough. I turned toward the exit, the same path I had almost taken before. But this time it felt different. Not like leaving. Like choosing. The doors opened easily, the cool night air meeting me as I stepped outside. It was quiet out there. No music. No voices. Just space. I took a breath, deeper this time, letting it settle. Behind me, through the glass, I could still see the room, the people, the movement. But it felt far away now. And for the first time that night, I did not feel like I was standing on the outside looking in. I felt like I had already stepped beyond it. I made it halfway across the parking lot before I heard the door open behind me. The sound carried in the quiet, sharp against the still night air, followed by footsteps that were faster than they needed to be. I did not turn around right away. I already knew who it was. Emily, wait. It was Daniel. Of course it was. I stopped, but I did not face him immediately. I stood there for a second, looking out at the empty rows of cars, the soft glow of the streetlights stretching across the pavement. Then I turned. He was standing a few feet away from me now, slightly out of breath, his jacket half unbuttoned like he had rushed out without thinking. You cannot just leave like that, he said, his voice lower than before, but still carrying that edge of urgency. I looked at him for a moment, then said calmly, I already did. He exhaled, running a hand over the back of his neck. That is not what I mean, he said. Everyone is talking in there. They are asking about you. I nodded once. I figured. There was a pause. He shifted his weight slightly, like he was trying to find the right words and not quite landing on them. My mom, she did not know, he said finally. I did not react. Not outwardly. She did not know what? I asked. About you. About what you do. About today. His voice softened slightly, like he thought that would make it better. I held his gaze. She knew enough, I said. She knew how to treat me. That landed. It could see it in the way his expression tightened, in the way he looked down for a second before meeting my eyes again. It is not like that, he said. I did not respond right away. I let the silence sit there, the same way it had sat in that room earlier, letting him feel it this time. Then what is it like? I asked quietly. He opened his mouth, then hesitated. She just has expectations, he said, about how things are supposed to be. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. And I do not meet them, I said. That is what you are saying. No, he said quickly. That is not what I meant. But it was. We both knew it. I shifted my bag on my shoulder again, the motion familiar now, grounding. I ran from a 12-hour shift to be there tonight, I said. I did not stop. I did not go home. I came straight there. He nodded. I know that now. You knew I had work, I continued. You knew what my job is. You have always known. He did not interrupt. And when they laughed, I said, my voice still even, still controlled, you said nothing. He looked away again. That was answer enough. The quiet stretched between us, but it did not feel heavy anymore. It felt clear. Simple. I was trying to keep things calm, he said after a moment, like he needed to fill the space with something. It was not the right moment to, he trailed off, not finishing the sentence. I nodded slowly. There is never a right moment, I said. That is the problem. He looked back at me, something unsettled in his expression now. What does that mean? He asked. I took a breath, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to say this once clearly. It means every time something like that happens, I said, you choose to wait. You choose to stay quiet. You choose them. His jaw tightened slightly. That is not fair, he said. I am your husband. Yes, I said. You are. I let that sit for a second before adding, but tonight you did not act like it. He flinched slightly at that. Not dramatically, just enough to show it landed. I came out here because I care, he said, his voice softer now, less defensive. I did not want you to leave upset. I looked at him for a long moment. I am not upset, I said. And that was the truth. The anger I might have felt earlier had settled into something else. Something quieter. Something more certain. Then what is this? He asked, gesturing lightly between us. I considered that for a second. Clarity, I said. He frowned slightly, like he did not understand. Maybe he did not. Emily, he started, but I shook my head gently. I am tired, I repeated. Not just tonight. Not just from work. I met his eyes again, steady. I am tired of trying to earn something that should already be there. He did not respond. He just stood there, looking at me like he was seeing something he had missed before. Maybe he was. Maybe it just took this moment for it to become visible to him. Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see movement inside again. People shifting, gathering, still talking. The world he was used to. The one he had never questioned. They are going to come out here, he said after a moment, glancing back toward the building. They are going to want to talk to you. I nodded. Maybe. You should hear them out, he added. I did not answer that, because I already knew what they would say. It would be different now. Softer. More respectful. Maybe even apologetic. But it would not change what had already happened. It would not change how easily it had happened. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my car keys, the small metallic click echoing slightly in the quiet. I am going home, I said. He looked at the keys, then back at me. Can we talk about this later? He asked. I paused for a second, considering the question, not the words themselves but what they meant. We can talk, I said finally. But it will not be the same conversation. He did not ask what that meant. Maybe he understood. Maybe he was just not ready to. I walked past him heading toward my car, the cool air settling around me again. I could feel his gaze on me, but he did not follow this time. And somehow that said more than anything he could have. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment. Before starting the engine, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, the silence inside the car wrapping around me in a way that felt almost unfamiliar after everything that had just happened. My reflection stared back at me in the dark windshield, faint under the glow of the parking lot lights. Scrubs. Tired eyes. Hair still pulled back the same way it had been 12 hours ago. Nothing about me had changed. And yet everything had. I started the car, the low hum filling the space, grounding me in something steady, something real. I pulled out slowly, the building shrinking behind me in the rearview mirror, its bright windows still glowing with movement and voices I could no longer hear. I did not turn back. The drive home was quiet. No music. No calls. Just the soft rhythm of the road and the steady movement of passing streetlights. My mind did not race the way it usually did after a long shift. There was no replaying of decisions, no second-guessing, no going over what I could have said differently. It was just still. Clear in a way I had not felt in a long time. When I reached my apartment, I parked in my usual spot and sat there for a second before turning off the engine. The silence returned, deeper this time, not empty, just settled. I stepped out, the cool air brushing against my skin, and made my way inside. The hallway was quiet. No voices. No expectations. Just the soft echo of my footsteps as I walked to my door. I unlocked it and stepped in, closing it gently behind me. My space. Small. Simple. Mine. I set my bag down on the counter and leaned back against it for a moment, letting the weight of the day finally catch up to me. Not all at once. Just enough to remind me how long it had been. I walked to the sink, washing my hands slowly, the familiar motion automatic, grounding. The faint smell of antiseptic faded as the water ran, replaced by something cleaner, something softer. I dried my hands and looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. Same person. Same face. But I saw it differently now. Not through their eyes. Not through their expectations. Just as it was. My phone buzzed on the counter behind me. Once. Then again. Then. Again. I did not turn right away. I already knew who it would be. I picked it up after the fourth vibration. Daniel. His name filled the screen. A missed call. Then a message. Then another. I unlocked it slowly, reading without reacting. Are you home? Can we talk? My mom wants to apologize. I stared at that last message for a second longer than the others. Wants to apologize. The words felt distant. Not wrong. Just late. I set the phone down without replying. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Just because I did not feel the need to respond right now. Maybe later. Maybe not. I moved through the apartment quietly, changing out of my scrubs, folding them neatly out of habit, placing them in the laundry basket by the door. I put on a soft sweater, the fabric warm against my skin, a small contrast to the sterile environment I had been in all day. I made a cup of tea, the simple process slow and deliberate, something I had not allowed myself to do in a long time without thinking about what came next. When I finally sat down on the couch, the room felt still in the best way. No tension. No expectations. Just space. My phone buzzed again. This time I glanced at it. A new message. Not from Daniel. From a number I did not immediately recognize. I opened it. This is Rebecca. I just wanted to say. I did not know. I am sorry. I read it once. Then again. The words were simple. Careful. I could almost hear her voice in them, softer than before, less certain. I set the phone down again. A few seconds later, another message appeared. This time from his mother. I hesitated before opening it. Emily, I owe you an apology. I spoke without understanding. I would appreciate the chance to make it right. I read that one more slowly. Each word measured. Intentional. And for a moment I just sat there, looking at the screen, letting it settle. Not the apology itself, but what it represented. A shift. A change. But not the kind that erases what came before. I placed the phone face down on the table and leaned back into the couch, Closing my eyes for a moment, I thought about the room, the laughter, the silence that followed, the way everything had turned in a matter of minutes, and I realized something I had not fully understood until now. Their respect was never something I was missing. It was something they had chosen not to give. And now that they were ready to offer it, I was no longer waiting for it. I opened my eyes, the room coming back into focus, steady and quiet. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I had something to prove. Not to them. Not to anyone. My phone buzzed one more time, but I did not reach for it. I just sat there, letting the moment exist exactly as it was. And that night, for the first time since I had walked into that room, I felt something shift completely. Not in them. In me. The next morning did not feel dramatic. There was no sudden realization, no overwhelming emotion waiting for me when I opened my eyes. It was quiet. Simple. I woke up before my alarm, the soft light coming through the window, the city outside already moving in its usual rhythm. For a moment I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the stillness settle. Then I reached for my phone. More messages. Daniel. His mother. Rebecca. Even a few numbers I did not recognize. I did not open them right away. I sat up slowly, placing my feet on the floor, grounding myself in the routine I knew. Because that was what mattered now. Not what they said after the fact. Not how they were trying to rewrite the night. Just what was real. I moved through my morning the same way I always did. Shower. Coffee. A quick check of my schedule for the day. Another long shift. Another full list of patients depending on me to show up, to focus, to be present in ways that had nothing to do with anyone's approval. That part of my life had never been uncertain. That part had always been clear. When I finally picked up my phone again, I opened Daniel's messages first. There were several. Longer this time. I have been thinking all night. I did not handle that well. Can we talk tonight? I read them carefully, not rushing, not reacting. Then I opened the one from his mother again. The apology. Formal. Controlled. Measured. I could almost see her. Sitting at a perfectly arranged table, choosing each word with intention. I set the phone down without replying. Not yet. Because I wanted to be sure that whatever I said next came from clarity, not from pressure. Not from the expectation that I should accept something just because it was finally being offered. At the hospital, everything felt the same as it always did. The halls were busy. The lights bright. The steady rhythm of movement, voices, machines, all blending into something familiar. Something that made sense. When I stepped into the operating room, none of what had happened the night before followed me in. Could not. There was no space for it there. Only focus. Only precision. Only the quiet understanding between people who knew exactly what needed to be done. Hours passed the way they always did. Without noticing. Without pause. And in those hours I felt something settle deeper inside me. Not pride. Not satisfaction. Just certainty. The kind that does not need to be spoken. The kind that does not change depending on who is watching. During a short break I stepped into the staff lounge, grabbing a cup of water, leaning against the counter for a moment. One of the nurses glanced at me. "Long night?" she asked. I nodded. "Something like that." She smiled slightly. "You handled that case yesterday really well." Simple words. No performance. No audience. Just recognition where it mattered. I nodded again. "Thank you." That was enough. When my shift finally ended, the sky outside had already begun to shift toward evening. I walked out of the hospital the same way I always did, my pace steady, my mind clear. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I did not check it right away. Not until I reached my car. I sat down, closing the door, letting the quiet return. Then I looked. A new message from Daniel. "I am outside your apartment." I stared at it for a second, letting the words settle. Then I looked at the time. He had been waiting. I did not feel rushed. I did not feel pressured. I just sat there for a moment longer, thinking about what that meant. Not the gesture itself, but the timing. The shift. Then I started the car and drove home. When I pulled into my parking spot, I saw him immediately. Standing near the entrance. Hands in his pockets. Looking up as my car approached. He did not wave. He did not move toward me. He just stood there. Waiting. I turned off the engine and sat for a second before stepping out. The air felt cooler than the night before. Or maybe it was just different. I walked toward him, my steps steady, my posture relaxed. He met me halfway this time. Not too close. Not too far. "Hi," he said. His voice was quieter than usual. I nodded. "Hi." There was a pause. Not awkward. Just careful. "I was not sure if you would want to see me," he admitted. I considered that for a moment. "I was not sure either," I said honestly. He nodded like he expected that answer. "I have been thinking about what you said," he continued. "About last night. About everything." I did not interrupt. I just listened. "You were right," he said after a second. "About me staying quiet. About choosing not to say anything." The words came out slower now, like he was making sure they were real. I told myself I was keeping things calm, but I was really just avoiding it. I watched him as he spoke, not judging, not filling in the gaps, just letting him say it. "And I see now what that looked like," he added. "To you." There was something different in his tone. Not defensive. Not trying to fix it quickly. Just acknowledging. "It looked like you agreed with them," I said simply. He nodded. "I know." The silence that followed felt different from the ones before. Not heavy. Not tense. Just open. "My mom wants to talk to you," he said after a moment. "In person. She asked me to ask you." I held his gaze for a second, then looked past him toward the building, then back at him. "I am not ready for that," I said. He nodded immediately. "That is fair. No push. No argument. Just acceptance." And that mattered more than anything he could have said earlier. I shifted my bag slightly, the familiar motion returning. "We can talk," I said. "You and me." He nodded again. "Okay." And for the first time since the night before, it did not feel like I was being pulled back into something. It felt like I was choosing what came next. Life did not suddenly become perfect. After that night, there was no dramatic shift where everything fell into place or where every relationship healed overnight. But it became clearer, quieter in a way that mattered. The following weeks felt different, not because the world around me had changed, but because I had. I went back to work, back to long shifts, early mornings, late nights, the same steady rhythm that had always grounded me. But now, when I walked into a room, I did not carry the same weight of needing to be seen or approved. I already knew who I was. And that was enough. Daniel and I had conversations. Not easy ones. Not quick ones. The kind that take time, honesty, and a willingness to sit in uncomfortable truths. He listened more. Really listened. And for the first time I saw him trying not just to keep peace but to stand in it with me. His family reached out too. Apologies came, carefully worded, sometimes awkward, sometimes sincere. I did not rush to accept them. I did not reject them either. I simply chose what felt right for me at my own pace. Because that was something I had learned. Boundaries are not punishments. They are clarity. They are how you protect the parts of yourself that took years to build. And the truth is, people will treat you based on what you allow, not just what you deserve. That night did not give me value. It revealed it. It showed me that I had been standing in my own worth all along, even when others refused to see it. And if you are listening to this right now, if you have ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel like you had to prove your place in someone else's world, I want you to know something. You do not have to shrink yourself to fit where you are not respected. You do not have to earn basic decency. And you do not have to wait for someone else to recognize your worth before you believe in it yourself. Sometimes the hardest thing is not proving them wrong. It is choosing yourself without needing their approval. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Truly. Because sharing something like this means trusting that someone out there will understand, will feel less alone, will see a piece of themselves in it. And if this story resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from and what time is it there right now? And if you have ever had a moment where everything changed how you saw yourself, what did it teach you? Only if this story truly speaks to your heart, you can like and subscribe, but more than anything, just know that you are not alone in what you feel. My name is Emily Carter, I am 29 years old, and the lesson I want to leave with you is this. Never let anyone else define your worth when you have already built it yourself.